everybody on what a great job that y'all did this past Saturday in your preparation for Saturday tonight. And I think I'm echoing everybody here. It's like we were back eating and everybody was very, very, very complimentary. And then over the weekend, I was just thinking about Saturday from when we started to now how far we've come and just the professionalism that this event's been run and where we were and where we're going is just very exciting to me. I know the rest of the commissioners probably feel the same way. And anyway, I can't thank you enough for what a great job you did. So make sure you let some of the people that aren't here to let them know, because I know they can't be here tonight, but it was great. So anyway, with that, go ahead and get the meeting started.
Thank you, Chair Lapine, Vice Chair Lindsay, and members of the board. We truly feel that Saturday was a very good step in the right direction as we understand where we were. That's the only way you know where you're going. You have to know how we got here. So we are excited about moving our CRC forward. So the second part of your retreat, we are focusing on our capital improvement budget, our operating budget, as well as our enterprise fund. But before that, I'll go ahead and get started with the executive director's report because, as you recall, policy is very important, the updating of policy. So what we have been doing over the last few months is bringing in policies. The first time you receive the policy is for your review, give you time to ask any questions, get clarifications, and then the second reading is where we request for the action. So what you have before you today, is the leave policy. The leave policy was given to you at your previous meeting. This policy replaces policies 15, 45, 133, 145, and 176. Just to give you a brief overview, the purpose of this policy revision is to give the employees the ability and the responsibility for monitoring their own sick and annual leave accruals. It also will allow them to have one area to visit where they have questions about their leave. Previously, we've run into issues where employees would turn in their 2-week notice and request sick leave or annual leave and not actually work the 2 weeks. So this will give us a checks and balance. And we want to make sure that it is clear for our employees that they are still responsible for their benefit payments while they are out on leave. So these are some overviews that we have included. There has been one change. We did remove my ability to extend the sick leave maximum because of the annual leave maximum, excuse me, because we feel that COVID, this is why I wanted to make that recommendation, but it's not something that we wanted to have memorialized. So we decided that we will use it from a procedural standpoint instead of a policy issue. So that has been removed. That concludes my overview of the policy. We have our Human Resources Director here that can provide additional overview if the board needs so.
As far as annual and sick leave, we have my page right here.
Yes.
When the numbers, I know for myself, old time with the county, that increase in happened, got into use or lose. Are we notifying employees when they get to that state?
In the policy, we changed it so that they have to monitor their own leave statuses throughout the year. And then in January, I do send out a notice to them asking them if they would like to donate to our leave pool.
And the reason we did this is because previously with the numbers, they weren't seeing their leave and it wasn't as updated, but we worked really hard in payroll to update all the leave so that we started off at the proper place, and it is the responsibility of the employee. Because we did have some issues at the end of the year, but this particular year, we are working with everyone because of COVID. So they will not be losing the leave as they have in the past as fast because we want to give them the opportunity, sir.
I know we have the ability to carry over, I think 37.5 hours.
Ours is 45, I don't have everything in front of me right now, but I know it's 45 days that you're allowed to carry over from one year to the next as far as annual leave goes. And then for sick leave, I believe it's 1,560 hours they can carry up to max from year to year. And we have a great timekeeping system, so it's really easy for them to be able to log on and see what our current leave balances are.
As soon as they open it up, it's right there. It looks at me every time I look at it. It's like, hello, if you have vacation hours and you're not taking it.
Our organization is very different from every other county organization in that our people work a lot of Saturdays and Sundays and Friday nights and things like that. What do we do to make sure that our people aren't getting burnt out? And then I think in the past what's happened is maybe that's why it's been a little loosey-goosey with, you know, people doing stuff and people feeling like they can get away with this, that, and the other thing. Because they are coming in on Saturday or Sunday, they are coming in on a holiday. But then I think that's also gotten them and our organization in trouble in the past. So how do we have that structure going?
We have a great work-life balance within all of our departments. Employees are allowed to request leave off. I've yet to have a situation where somebody was denied, unless it's during summer season. We have to say that, you know, May, June, that's our busy season. We really want our employees here to be able to take care of our kids and our campers. Beyond that, our holiday pay policy, because of that, we went and incorporated and said, when you work on a holiday, you're able to get time and a half. That also helps them be able to at least see some kind of benefit in their paycheck. And,
Adjustable work schedules and compressed work schedules. The focus of your work schedule, with the exception of the individuals that work specifically for administration, we practice your schedule is focused around your actual program or activity. So we're not asking you to come in and sit for 7 hours when there's nothing happening. We want the schedule to go around when the programs are. So that helps with a good work-life balance as well, sir.
we just had an EAP program the other day that focused on stress management. So we are trying to put things out to employees so that they can take that, you know, release from work and know how to deal with it when they leave here as well.
We don't have people working 7 days a week. Most of our people working like some form of like 4 or 5 day shifts.
No, sir, we don't have 7 yet. It's rotated, it's compressed.
Right.
Yes, sir. No one's waking up and going 7 days a week.
Any further questions?
So during orientation, is all this being discussed with employees?
Oh, yes, sir, 100%.
Okay, what about old timers who've been there a while and need to be up?
Well, for something like this, because it's gonna be a new policy, we are requiring everybody to have a signature on it so that they are aware what's changing, because I definitely want employees to know the updates that we're making, because when they come to us, I am gonna, you know, reference the policy. And we're always updating the handbook. Now when employees are hired, because we're going to a new timekeeping system, they'll automatically see it, be able to download it, and we made it a PDF file now. So anytime an employee wants a handbook, it's really easy to get it to them at this point. You know, we try.
Oh, yes.
I know, Don Zetta, do you have any questions?
No, not on annual or sick leave, but I do have a question regarding the military leave of absence.
I texted her and asked her if she had any questions. She looks happy.
She does have a question in regard to military leave. You can hear me.
And nothing with that policy has changed. That's government.
Yes.
Standard
That's
military.
Standard military.
Yeah, we're not messing with that one. We just wanted to combine it so it's all in the lead policy.
Yes, we had so many, as you see, there were 5, 6 different policies that reference leave. And best practices is to have all leave in one place.
Is there, for Ms. Lindsay, is there a way to see what her question is exactly, or she has any follow-up?
No, I said I'm all right with the annual leave and
She's
sick leave.
unmuted. Did she say something?
She might not come, I think that the gal's in the back.
And she can put her question also in the comment section of the Zoom, and then we can see it from there if we're having any audio issues. When we take a break to set up the other presentation, we'll see if we can make sure that we can hear her live.
Well, because you want us to take action on this, right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying, right?
Can she raise her hand? Can you hear us, Ms. Lindsay?
I don't understand.
Mr. Lindsay, can you
I'm
hear
sorry.
us? If you can you raise your hand?
I can hear you. Are you gonna do a presentation on this leave? can you hear me? Hello?
How many people do we have making use of our military leave policies and stuff like that? How many's
We have
military?
one person out
Hey,
right now.
Rosetta,
Yeah,
do you have any questions? Because I know you might ask some questions about policy. We need to make sure that if you have any questions or follow-up, that we can't hear you on Zoom.
oh, you can't?
Uh-uh.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna put
Is
you
it
on speaker.
something-
You can ask her.
Can you check, is she muted?
Go ahead.
Okay, my question is, I said I'm okay with the annual and sick leave policies. It's the military leave of absence that I have questions about.
Okay. She made a comment, I don't know if you heard, but it's the exact same as it was before, so what's your question?
I'm getting a whistle. What did you say?
What, it's the exact same policy as before, so what's your question? Okay, I think they're trying to mute you, just talking to the phone for right now.
Tell her to put her thing on silent.
Yeah, talk through the phone, everybody can hear you.
The word may is in all of our policies. That is normal language that he utilizes for us.
And I'll even say Joseph took this back and looked at it again, just on the military part. That was like the last thing that held him up. He just wanted to look at a couple more things, so Joseph definitely spent some time on the military part.
I would say that, to Commissioner Lindsay's point,
Wait, hold on. Can you hear this, Rosanna?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
You can hear Steve and everything?
to Commissioner Lindsay's point, I would prefer it if there was more of a slant towards the military member as opposed to our organization. And that's just how I feel, that I don't want, right now we only have one person, that's an issue. I would not want any military member who's also in our organization to be, like, I would want that person to have more of a benefit than our organization, if that makes sense. And I would say that, so like when it says like may, I would like the language of may taken out. And that's just how I feel about it, because I know people who've been in that situation who are service members, and it's very difficult when a policy like, where a term like may allows the organization to do stuff, moving that person around, and the organization feels like we're just having a little bit of, like, we're in a meeting right now having this flexibility, and 5 years down the road, there's gonna be a service member whose life is greatly affected because not you, not Lakita, but some supervisor says, well, because the policy says may, I can move this person around and he's not going back, or she's not going back to their exact spot, and they've lost that protection.
I have reached out to Joseph so that he can provide us with additional dialogue on the wording that he utilized as a part of that policy. So we can hold off on that action until we can get that clarification from him, and then we can move the
Well,
policy.
in almost in every other instance, situation, I would like the language made in there, and I would like our organization to come first. But when it comes to our military service members, it is a very difficult, this is a very difficult hardship that they have reintegrated back into regular life, and not being able to get right back where they were can be really hard for them.
And we definitely understand, by no means that we make the recommendation to change the language or to not say must, but again, this is the general way that he has done all of our policies, so we will take this back to him because I can't put something in place that may not be legal. I would rather him do it than come and explain to you all, and then we can make the vote from there.
Well, I think a lot of times, it's written with may because there may be some change of circumstance that may prevent someone from going back to that position. Say if they come back and they've got close, right, or they could have some kind of, something that happens that doesn't allow them to return. So, I mean, it just allows for flexibility. A lot of law, shall and may is very important in the law. Because shall is an affirmative, you have to do it. May does allow for flexibility, but I don't read it as though the flexibility would be, not in the military, service members' favor. I mean, when you start getting into shall, it backs everybody into a corner. Because, I mean, what if that position is eliminated? What if that particular job, the site is closed? What do you do in that circumstance? You got a shall.
That's what you do on the state laws on military leave. You can look it up online.
I understand that, and it does say that they're gonna follow the state or federal law. It says that in there in paragraph 8.
Yes.
Provided by applicable state and federal law. I'm talking about circumstances. I'm not talking about what the law says. They can't fire the person, they can't. But if circumstances change, you can't put somebody back in exactly the spot they were in.
Well, that's stated, they don't have to be in the same exact position, but they have to be one of equal or the same.
Right, so that allows for,
Okay, that's what I was just saying. I'm trying to protect people.
yeah, and that allows for them to be able to do it. I'm just, it's just, when you start getting into shall, it just doesn't allow for changes in circumstances.
Well,
But I will let, I just wanted to make that point,
Well, I
but,
mean, if it says it, you're a lawyer.
but I don't know, I know, because that's not my area of specialty. I'd rather,
Laws on military leave, and it tells you every state in the United States and what their policy is. And that's all I'm asking, that we state that in some way we hold the law.
it does say that in paragraph 8,
So it's covered in.
provided
paragraph
by applicable state and federal law. I mean, if we don't follow state and federal law, we get sued. So, I mean, you gotta do it. And somebody who's in my position in 5 years, they should be a certified HR professional, and the supervisor's not gonna be making that decision, HR director.
I just want to make sure that the employees realize that they are entitled to leave. They can come into their job or one of equal status.
And I will say, this, the specific instances that I've seen that involve the school district, and I have a friend, they were working at one school, and they came back and they'd given that job to somebody else. And then they knew that that person who they give the job to was going to leave, and they were gonna have a job opening, and that person could have gotten back in May. But then they said, no, like, now you're locked in to go to another, we're gonna put you in another location. Comfortable position or whatever, but it's a different location, if that makes sense. And then, once they were in that, they were trapped at that thing. They said, no, now you're in another school. You've already, so I think sometimes, like, I've seen the school issues with the school district in that, and I would like to save our organization from that. But I agree with you that, like, it does say it in there that we are gonna follow state and federal law, And it can be dangerous if we put ourselves in a shell situation.
I have one other question. This is an action, policy. Are we supposed to vote on this tonight, or we could do this in a regular meeting?
This is a regular meeting.
I thought this was a retreat.
It's a regular meeting.
That was Saturday.
Saturday was, and this is kind of a regular meeting / retreat.
And the agenda did go out to the public, which did include
Right.
this as an action item, and it was a part of your packet in the previous meeting. I do have, Mr. Joseph Dickey on the cell phone. As it relates to the question, Joseph, that was on the table, was the difference between the word shall and must, in the military policy, shall and may in the military policy, the military leave portion of the policy. There was some concern that we should have the word must instead of shall to protect the employees that may experience the military leave. In addition, the question came up in a comparison to the state and federal laws. Is our policy in line with that?
From what I reviewed, the policy, the military leave policy is in line with, USERA and the military provisions of FMLA. In doing so, though, that doesn't mean that your policy needs to read exactly how the statute reads in federal law. If you have a handbook, you don't want your policy to have mandatory language that's going to create contractual terms that employees are going to try to use against you later. So in using the permissive language, you're able to have some flexibility and you to not have the contract, have a handbook turned into a contract or a policy turned into a contract. And then you're able to still comply with the law. Does that answer the question or provide some context?
That answers it for me.
I'm trying to log on.
No, sir, it's fine. It does answer the question, to the individuals that are in attendance. We're just waiting for Commissioner Lindsay to see if there is any additional information she needs from you as it relates to that.
Fine with me, as long as it's legal.
All right, thank you, Joseph. I don't think that you are on the purchasing card policy, so I will release you now. Thank you, sir. Good. So that does conclude our presentation for the leave policies, and it is an action item on your agenda. Mr. Chair, it is on you.
Yeah, I look for the commissioners to make it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I move that we approve leave policy, which is policy number 131, which is replacing previous policy numbers 1545, 133, 145, and 176.
I second that.
Roll
Call
call.
for the vote.
This is for roll call. Lapine,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Cotton,
Yes.
Coach V,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes,
vote pass, unanimous.
All right.
The next policy is for review, not for action.
Hey, Gonzetta,
yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and put you on mute on my phone, but, well, I'll just leave it on. I'm just gonna put my phone down and you can listen and just, if you have questions, just ask me my phone. I'm just gonna set it down.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Our next item is the purchase card policy is for your review. If you recall, Sarah, along with Lawrence, both gave an overview of this policy. It has been put together with our CFO, our procurement manager, as well as our deputy director. The purchasing card program will be managed by our procurement manager. In section 3, number 2. The procurement manager will also provide training for all roles for the purchase cards, that is in section 11. And the policy details authorized and unauthorized purchases, which are included in section 6 and section 12. I have not read Roman numbers. So in those sections, so section 3 talks about the program being managed. Section 11 talks about the provided training, and then the section 6 and section 12 focuses on authorized and unauthorized purchases. I will add, in addition, our deputy director wanted me to share that the card holders and their P card amounts will be approved, not only by the supervisors, but with the team you see here in leadership. Roles and responsibilities of that P card holder are established for accountability purposes. Monthly reconciliations will be conducted for every purchase card, and purchase cards thresholds and prohibited purchases are all outlined in this policy. With that being said, we recognize that this is a major change from the way we have done business previously. However, the three of us have intimate knowledge and have done this in previous positions and feel it's a more effective and efficient way to do business as an agency. We are not asking for a vote. What we are asking is that you continue to review the documentation. We will be here next month with another overview. Our procurement manager will be here as well to answer any additional questions that you may have. But this is for your review and concludes the report for the executive director.
Will this be, so it won't be an action item in February, it will be in March?
February is the last meeting in February, and we can run that if you don't, we would prefer, because if you recall from what we shared through Lawrence, is that we are currently operating, within policy, but we need to strengthen the
No, I'm
procurement
saying,
policy.
can we make it an action item in February?
Yes, we can. If you would like us to add it to the agenda for February, you all can review it and we'll have it as an action item.
Yeah, that mean we have to vote.
No, sir.
Let's make it an action item.
All right, we'll have that for next month. And that
Is it
concludes
possible
my
to
report.
vote on it in February?
Mhm.
We just have to review this before, and if you have any questions, we'll ask them in and vote.
And then thank you to the team for pulling this together. It was one of the first things I asked about when I first came in, and we just want to make sure that we are being compliant through our procurement and purchase cards. So here, now we're going to take maybe a break. Oh, no, it's already up. Brandy, our CFO, will be coming to you tonight. We are truly excited as she's about to prepare her presentation. I would like to share with you that, as you recall, we left out in December and we worked on a compressed schedule because of COVID. We have continued that compressed schedule because the numbers are still rising. And we don't feel that we are in a position to fully do and come back at that 40 until we are able ourselves to be in that line for the vaccine. So we are balancing, as you see, the work is still being done, our property management, they're actually working a little more because they're doing winter projects to get us prepared for spring, but we are open across the street. You go back and you'll see the news releases that went out. So we are conducting business, but because of the numbers and some of the rates that we've seen even in our agency, we just feel that right now, 20 to 25 hours based solely on the programs that you're working gives us a little reprieve until we're able to actually come back once the vaccine has been disseminated. So I do want to share that with you all. We are still open for business, but most of us are not at that full 40 in the building because of rates.
Good afternoon. Okay. What I'll be doing tonight is providing you an overview of a capital improvement plan. But before I begin, there's two housekeeping notes. One, I was blessed with many things, but a loud voice is not one. So if you cannot hear me at any time, please make sure you let me know. I will definitely try to speak higher. Secondly, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask the question. I'll try to answer it as best I can. But before we begin tonight's discussion, let's think about the mission of the commission, which is to enrich lives and connect communities. And we do that by providing dynamic recreational programming through our safe and secure facilities. And so the purpose of tonight's discussion is to talk about what is the process that we have to undergo in order to acquire, construct, and finance those capital assets that are needed to continue to build the mission. Okay, so before we talk about a capital improvement plan, there's a few definitions we need to discuss. The first definition is, well, what is a capital expenditure? I've been before you many times talking about our operating budget, so we kind of have an idea of what an operating expenditure is, but what is a capital expenditure? And so a capital expenditure is a purchase of a long-term asset. And for purposes of our discussion, what is a long-term asset? It's an asset that has a useful life of more than 1 year. And for our agency, it's an asset whose cost exceeds about $5,000. Okay, so that is a capital expenditure. Well, what is a capital project? A capital project is first you have to be a capital expenditure, and then it has to be a major cost. So what is a major cost? That is a cost that exceeds $50,000 and an asset that has a useful life of more than 30 years. Excuse me. So first, we know what a capital expenditure is, and then secondly, we know what a capital project is. It's a capital expenditure that whose costs are major, so those costs exceed $50,000, and that asset tends to have a useful life of more than 30 years. Okay. Now that we know what a capital expenditure is and a capital project is, let's now talk about, well, what is this actual capital improvement plan? And the first thing that a capital improvement plan is number one, it's a planning tool. And so what it does is it helps us identify what our capital project needs are, and it helps us coordinate the financing and the timing of when we can make those improvements that will help benefit or maximize the return for our stakeholders, which are our citizens. Okay, the capital improvement plan consists of two parts. First is the actual capital program itself. And so that is the listing of all of our capital expenditures for at least 5 to 10 years. The second part of our capital improvement plan is the actual capital improvement budget. And that is typically the first year of your capital improvement plan. Now, it's very important as we work through developing our capital improvement plan that we also look at our operating budget. There's a distinction between our capital budget and our operating budget. And the major distinction is one, our operating budget, those appropriations lapse at the end of that current fiscal year. When it comes to our capital budget, those appropriations actually lapse or end at the end of that capital project. And so as we're developing our capital improvement plan, we also have to keep in sight what are the impacts does this project have on our operating budget? And if we have to finance those capital expenditures, what is the impact of those financing costs on our operating budget? Okay. Any questions on that? No? You look like you might have to.
I do, but I don't think you want me to, it's just just keep going.
All right, so again, there's two parts of the capital improvement plan. And the last thing I want you to know is that the capital improvement plan is a working document. So it's not something that we're going to develop 1 year and just put on the shelf. We have to continuously update it because costs and needs change, as well as any funding opportunity. So again, it is a working document.
So I guess that leads into, I guess, my question. So, so when you're talking about like ongoing 5 to 10 year capital expenditures, right?
Right.
Well, you know, like at Park Lane, you're gonna have to replace a $10,000 HVAC unit, which air conditioning units are considered capital expenditures. Or for instance, across the street, let's say it's been there for 20 years and you have to replace the roof, right?
Right.
So those would be considered capital expenditures?
Right, they would be considered capital expenditures. And the reason that they would be included in our capital improvement plan is because the cost of those to replace those will tend to be more than $50,000.
Correct.
Okay,
But if it's 5,000,
if it's 5,000, we would put those in our operating budget.
that's an operating, that's a capital expenditure within operating budget, correct?
So that would
Capital
be,
expenditure within the operating budget.
it is that $5,000, correct? That would be a capital
Because you
expenditure
can, it's just the way
in our
you
right.
appreciate it or whatever, right?
Well, the distinction is the cost, because if we were to put that $50,000 project in, cost in our operating budget for 1 year, that could significantly distort what our operating costs are. And so that's why we pull those out and we have our capital improvement plan, our capital
Just
budget.
for the purposes of this conversation, we have 40 different facilities, is what Lakita said the other day, or we know that, but let's just say there's 4 sets of 10 things that have been built at different ages, but let's just say 10 of those units have to have the the roofs replaced
Right,
at over $50,000 over the next 10 years.
correct.
So do you know what all those are now, or do you just make a blanket number?
No, we know what those are, and we're gonna go through how we actually walk through getting to this capital improvement plan. So that'll be a part of that discussion, but yes, we know what those are.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, so what is the benefit of a capital improvement plan? We all know that our agency has a lot of needs, as well as our community has a lot of needs. But there are not a lot of resources in order to satisfy those needs. And so what a capital improvement plan will do is it will allow us to evaluate the needs and prioritize those needs and come up with an optimal financing plan so that we can be able to make those improvements or construct those different facilities. So again, that's one benefit of a capital improvement plan. Another is it also informs our public of what types of infrastructure we're planning on investing, not only for this year, but over the next 5 to 10 years. And then it also helps to synchronize our capital and operating budgets together. Because again, whenever we have a capital project, there could be some impacts in the future on our operating budget. And as we finance those projects, there could be some financing costs that impact our budget. So we need to sync those two up so that we can get an accurate picture of what our costs will be, not only this year, again, but for the long term. Okay. There's some features of our capital improvement plan. It starts with a capital project worksheet. And so in that worksheet, what the requesting department is going to do is going to provide us a description of the project. It's going to provide us what is the justification for this project, as well as, well, when do we think we want to start construction? When are we going to expend those dollars? Also, how are we going to pay for it? What funds are you proposing that we use to be able to finance this project? So all of that's going to be included in that capital project worksheet. And from there, we can then add all of these different elements to our capital improvement plan. And I won't waste time getting it out to you. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Okay. Okay, and so going back to your question, Rob, how do we get to this capital improvement plan? Well, these are the steps that are needed in that capital planning cycle. The first step is to identify, well, what are our needs? And so in this step, we're gonna get input from all of our stakeholders. So that would be our citizens, our employees, as well as our commissioners. And then from there, we're gonna assess, well, what are the current state of our current facilities? So to determine where we need to finance construction, what buildings need to be improved. So step one, identify our needs. Step two, once we've identified those needs, now we need to assign a cost to those needs. So how much is it gonna cost to repair 10 roofs every year? Or how much would it cost if we want to build a multi-generational facility in 10 years? How much is that gonna cost us? Once we determine what those costs are, we then prioritize those capital requests. And then from there, that's where the bean counters come in, like me. Then we're gonna look at those capital requests, and we're gonna analyze, well, what is the best way that we can finance these particular projects? So we're gonna look at what is the available financing. Should we finance that through our current revenues? Do we need to issue debt? Are we at a point where we can afford as an agency to be able to finance this through debt? And so once we develop what those financing strategies are, then we come back to you and we are going to ask you for your review and approval. So that's reviewing and approving the actual plan itself, the capital budget, as well as our financing strategy. And then once we secure those approvals, we can then implement the plan and then begin to monitor it. Now, this isn't a static cycle, this is gonna happen continuously as we update and monitor the plan. Okay. So I've gone through what is a capital expenditure, what is a capital project, what is a capital improvement plan. Now, the next few slides, I'm gonna discuss how do we finance our capital projects and what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of each. So what we're used to, as a capital financing source, we're used to doing as an agency as pay as you go. And so that simply means we're gonna take our current revenues and finance our capital needs. Now, this particular method of financing is really only good for your small capital needs. Because again, you're pulling from your current revenues. So one of the advantages is you lower your borrowing costs. But a disadvantage is, let's say that we are planning a 10-year facility and I'm a citizen that's 70 years old. Well, there's an argument that could be made that me at 70 years old, by the time that facility is open, I'm not gonna be around to be able to benefit from it. So that is one disadvantage, of only using a pay-as-you-go method to finance your capital needs. The other, method of financing capital needs is through bond issuances or long-term debt. And this is really good if you have major projects that you need to finance or multi-year projects that you need to finance. There's two methods by way you can issue debt. There are your general obligation bonds, and then there are your revenue bonds. As an agency, we typically issue general obligation bonds. And those bonds are backed by the full faith and credit and taxing authority of a particular governmental unit. There are also certain limitations that you have when it comes to issuing general obligation bonds. And for us, we're limited to 8% of the total assessed real and personal property of Richland County. And so in terms of numbers, for the tax year 2019, the total assessed value of our real and personal property in Richland County was about $1.1 billion. So 8% of that is roughly $89 million. So based upon the law that is written today, if we were to issue general obligation bonds, we would have to obviously get approval from our county council, but the amount we're limited to is about $89 million.
So you don't have to get a vote for that. You just need the county council to approve it.
Right, for us to be able to issue those bonds. Now that's 89 million total debt that we can have in general obligation bonds. What we currently have out there now is 38 million. So if you reduce that number, we really are left with 51 million. But there's some other discussions that we would have to have around that, being able to issue those $51 million bonds, but this is just in general, trying to give you an understanding as to what we're limited to when it comes to issuing those general obligation bonds.
That $50 million bond, and then the capital improvement bond that we had, we're finishing up. Are we paying debt back on that, or is that?
Right, that $50 million bond issuance was issued in about 3 tranches. I think we got approval in 2008. One series of those bonds have already matured, and I think that was back in 2019. So there's 2 series that still are outstanding. Again, that total balance is about 38 million. So as it stands now, based upon this calculation, yes, we can have issued an outstanding a total of 89 million in general obligation bonds, assuming that we get approval from the county
But you still
council.
have to pay it back.
Well, yes, you still have to pay back. But when you factor in the amount that we already have outstanding,
Right.
that total left is 51 million.
I get that. I was just asking if you had to pay it back. And so you're basically just have like a little, you're debiting out a certain amount every month or year. It just goes back to pay that back, and it's just.
Those,
it's
we
in
have
here.
our operating millage, which is collected obviously through the county. We receive those tax checks every month.
But it comes out of
And then
that.
then we have was our debt service levy, which is about 2.5 mils. That is taken, collected through the county, and the treasurer pays the principal and interest on that every month. So we don't actually have to do it. It's done, on our behalf.
But it's,
But those two, I wanna make sure you understand, those 2 mills are separate. So you have operating and
That's
you
good.
have debt.
I like that. But that 2 mils is not part of that 5, or
No.
the 13,
That is not part of the 5, no.
or whatever it is that we asked for to
Well,
make up our difference.
The statutory cap is 5, but yeah, no, that's not part of the operating millage. There is
That's
the
good.
debt service millage, that's separate.
I like that.
Alright, so another, bond issuance is revenue bonds, and we don't tend to issue those because, how those bonds are paid back is the revenue that's generated. So those are generally, used to construct things like toll roads. So the toll is actually used, the revenue received from that toll road is actually used to repay the debt. So that's not typically what we're gonna do. We're typically gonna issue general obligation bonds. Now, one advantage for issuing or financing our capital projects through issuing this debt is that you are able to satisfy the total amount of the project at one time. So you're not piecemealing the project. So that allows you to be able to bring that project, to the benefit of your taxpayers a lot sooner, rather than trying to do it pay as you go. The next way that we can finance our capital projects is through what's called a short-term note or line of credit. This is another debt vehicle. It's a little different than bonds in that we don't have to necessarily go back to the county to get permission to be able to issue these. And there's lower debt costs when it comes to issuing long-term, or excuse me, short-term notes. One way that we can finance capital projects that we really haven't discussed before is what we call a capital reserve fund. And this is where we actually take dollars to earmark for capital projects. We can do this 2 ways. We can set up a separate capital reserve fund, which is totally separate from the general fund. Or we can designate a portion of our general reserve general fund specific to finance those capital projects. The advantage of that is that you lower your borrowing costs, so you're not repaying back principal and interest. But a disadvantage is it severely slows down the amount of time that it takes to implement some of these bigger projects, because you're waiting on accumulating the funds in that reserve account to be able to finance them. Another disadvantage is if we have that setting aside in years that are looming, like we've just seen this past year, legislators may go in and try to finance future operating needs with that reserve. And so it totally, does not allow you to use that reserve for what you intended it for, which is your capital project. And then the last 2 I'll talk about is joint financing. That's where you, partner with a local municipality or state to finance your capital needs. And the advantage of that is obviously you share the burden and the obligation in that capital project. And then lastly, you have federal and state grants. An example of that for us would be a community development block grant. The advantages for that is that you eliminate financing costs, but the disadvantage could be increased reporting. Any questions on those so far? Alright, so for us, we started this process of developing a capital improvement plan way back in 2019, I think, if I remember correctly. And so we did get through developing the plan, but there's some few outstanding tasks that we need to talk about at a future meeting, that's needed to complete the plan. First is we need to update our project list. We then also need to go in and rank those projects. And then finally, we need to really discuss or develop what is that financing plan that we're going to strategize for to be able to finance the projects that are in the plan. And then lastly, you should have in your packet, this is probably hard to see, but we have spent a few meeting, looking at some of our capital needs for this fiscal year. And so we updated that for 2021, and that is that column here that's the current budget year. So these are the things that we're planning to do, or finance as capital projects, for 2021. But we need to come back together to discuss the outer years, so that's 2022 through 2026.
And we would like to coordinate within the next 2 months, a work session specifically on the capital improvement plan and the budget. The budget will come to you as a part of the approval prior to us going to the county with our full budget. But I want to share with you, this was one of the things that when I looked at this position, this great community that we're in, that scared me. Because without a plan, you plan to fail. That's what I believe. And to have as many buildings and facilities that we have, you still have to have a plan on how you manage what you have, but then where you go for the future. So what you have before you is what the team has put together, but we would like to actually have dialogue and go back and forth, because you're out in the community, you're talking to the citizens, and we have prioritized this based off of safety and security, as well as some community need, but we're sure that we may have missed something. And this will continue to grow and change, but we really would like to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. The chair and I have had several conversations about capital improvements, not having funds for acquiring property. So that's why it was really important for us to go back and look at how can you finance projects. So we would like to go deeper into that discussion so that we can really formalize a good plan that we can sell in the next upcoming months. But I did want to share, we're not looking for a vote tonight, but we are asking that you do take the time to look at what we are recommending, and we will come back later on for a vote.
Do you have any
Yes,
questions?
I know you guys inherited, the $50 million bond that we got from county council, which didn't come with the operational budget for those projects. At what point do we sit down, revisit, with county council to inquire about some funding for the operational portion?
Now, I have started meetings, as you have requested. I've met with the 3 currently elected, newly elected members, and I have meetings scheduled with some of the remaining, so that we can have this dialogue. But there are additional projects I will share with you that you may not have even seen, that were not even a part of that 50 million that the county is planning on constructing and citizens have requested. And if you look in your packet and where you see neighborhood improvements in this PowerPoint, you'll see that there are projects listed: Atlas Road, Taylor Road, Candlewood Park, and Green Lakes Park. Green Lakes and Candlewood were part of the original bond. This Atlas Road project was new, and then there was another one that was out there as well. So I agree totally with you, Commissioner Clark, that not only the facilities that we currently have, but the newer facilities that they're looking to bring online and then transfer to us to maintain, there has to be an equation. So what the chair has asked us to do, and you'll hear a little bit from our park superintendent, is to identify and develop how much it costs to maintain these various facilities, so that when we're meeting with them, we're able to say, with this amount of acreage, with these amenities, this is what we see from our standard as the cost for operating.
So we doing a staffing analysis as well?
Yes.
And that's why it's also important to present both your capital budget and your operating budget at the same time, because those both impact each other. So that's what we're working towards for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Brandy. She will be back.
I will.
So I moved her up front with me. So now we'll introduce to you Darian. Darian Austin joined us last year as well from the city or the county. Where did you come from? Greenville. He came from Greenville. And I'm excited to have him on the team. But he's gotten in and helped us do a lot of understanding of where we are with our capital improvements. So we've accomplished some things. So he's going to share with you what we've accomplished, but then also just some of the needs that he has been seeing since he has arrived here with us. And we'll be able to show you that via some pictures as well.
You got a lot of those palms out there? Oh,
$50 million, you think, wow, that's great, we good, all these things, but then there's several things that weren't addressed. So, Mr. Austin, if you can first introduce yourself, give them a little bit of background. This is the first time the board is getting to meet you, and you're in public, and we'll take it from there. You know your time, right? You see your time.
2 hours.
No.
So, I'm Darren House, for the last 17 years, 16 years, with Greenwood County Parks and Rec. My last position there, I was Park Development Manager. So I'm originally from right across the river in Sumter County. So, been here since April 27th, I'm not counting days at all. And been happy about making the decision to leave Greenwood. So, just a quick overview of our division, property management. Unlike other divisions, I spend money, so Ms. Watson does hire me. So we have a little bit less than 1,000 acres that we have that the county owns, RCRC owns. About 2/3 of that is usable space. Building footprints, playgrounds, athletic fields, and walking trails. Have about 60 fields. We use about half of those fields that are being programmed by various leagues and that we program ourselves. And 90 acres of athletic turf. And we have well over 100,000 square feet of buildings that we have to also maintain. So, okay. Talk about what deferred maintenance is. Ms. Brandon touched on it quite a bit with some of the things. So when we build a building, we know that in about 20 years or so, we'll have to look at the roof. The HVAC unit look a lot more than $10,000, but it has to be replaced as well. Carpet has to be replaced. We have chairs that don't last as long. But we buy a bunch of them together, it's gonna be well over that $6,000. So that's also a capital purchase. But what deferred maintenance is repairs to the infrastructure and/or assets that are limited by budget. We have that issue here now, RCRC. This year, my wife and myself, I'm always keeping something up, I make it last longer, but I generally lose that battle. So here in 2019, 2020, some of the projects that were completed, restroom renovation at Trenum, also some other interior renovations at Trenum, replace the roof on this building, tech center, and also the Polo Road Storm Tower. That was completed prior to your arrival. So, what are some things that we should consider deferred maintenance? If we look at it from a 747 view, I want to give you a little bit closer view of some items that we consider deferred maintenance. Fencing will not last forever, but they'll tell you it'll last 20 years, but we got kids, soft toss baseball against, kicking soccer ball against, it doesn't last that long. Wells grade zinc from the coast of galvanized to make it not rust, it goes away. Then we have rust, we have broken wells, the fence capping, UV light gets it, so, that stuff has to be replaced. We have to, time it out and get it replaced in a safe and timely manner. Roofs is a real big thing right now. This is St. Andrews Park here on the left. That's a roof of a building that, thank goodness we don't use, but it is a roof that we have to maintain. Fire gate in the middle here, that's what we are replacing right now in-house. We do have qualified guys in-house to replace roofs at this size. You see North Springs Park on the right. We're also replacing that roof.
Period.
Yes,
When you just said, we don't, for St. Andrews, you said we don't have to use it?
this building is not being used at all right now. Those fields aren't used, so this building is used.
So we fix the roof?
We won't fix that roof. The only thing in that building right now are some electrical panels, and we will probably save a wall in that building, construct a new roof, and.
So we are gonna replace the roof though?
We're gonna tear the building down. And-
Oh, gotcha.
And save just a portion of it, one wall of that building, just for our electrical service. And that'll be done in-house by our guys in-house. ADA accessibility, we require by law anyway, and it's the right thing to do, to have safe egress, from a person that is, moving around under some help. So people with canes, wheelchairs, we also have to provide some spectator seating. In this case, it'll be spectator, bleacher pads
on either side of the bleachers. This is at North Springs Park right here. Over time, that washes out, you have to go in, fix the ruts, and hopefully don't get another rain too quick. Parking lots, for example, parking lots 20 years or so is a typical lifespan. If you get a crack, rains in that crack, freezes, that crack grows. Have it again next month, that half-inch crack, now you got 3/4-inch crack. And it just alligator tails on, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And after a while, we got a parking lot like here that we need to replace.
So, when you say replace the parking lot, that means, I mean, I know what that means, but what about ongoing, like just taking care of, striping and, what's it called, blacktop or just resealing it?
Seal coats on top.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that can be done to some parking lots that are not too far off. That parking lot is too far off to seal.
right, but if we keep up with it,
We can do
then
that.
theoretically, we can just reseal,
Correct.
fix a few holes, but then when it gets too far gone, we're done, and we gotta,
You gotta mill it up and put down more, so there and more asphalt.
And sir, most of these things are too far gone. I just wanted to share that, like, most of these, unfortunately,
no, I mean,
there was no preventive, regular routine maintenance, so we're playing catch up, we're not mad, but we just want to show it to
Well,
you
we're not
because
mad,
it's
but-
some money.
this is the stuff that makes us look bad.
Yes, that's right.
I mean,
No,
no, I'm serious, like,
Years ago, it's good.
yeah, and that's the point, is that, like, we're asking for money for capital improvements, and then Commissioner Clark says, we do have money to take care of it. It's so important because when our constituents and friends pull up to one of our parking lots, for instance, Hoffman Road, or, Polo Road Park was redone before y'all got here, but it took 20 years for them to redo it, and once they did it, it's done nice, but it's probably about time to reseal it pretty soon, and we gotta make sure we have the money to do that, because we're just shooting ourselves in the foot if we can't, but this is the stuff that, county council members will pull up in the park, and that's what, and if you have these things, these parking lots nice, that's just the beginning, it's when you first walk in, it makes everybody proud of the facility.
Kind of like walking to the bathroom, it smells good and it's clean, regardless of how it looks. So that's what a parking lot is kind of, and you're completely aware of. But you can see where we try to patch some of the potholes, but, we'll be on asphalt lines. So, look, here, this is, some lighting at North Springs. Wooden light poles are a thing of the past. What can happen is, subsurface, the wood can decay. You can't tell that by looking at it. That pole could eventually, it could fall. The worst thing is it falling during a game or some type of event. So we're taking wooden light poles and using concrete light poles, which is now, more of an industry standard. Also, we look here, I didn't have a real good picture of the lighting, but switching over to more efficient lighting. Right now, we're running 1,500 watt metal halide bulbs. They're super hot, they, cost a lot to operate, cost a lot to replace, and if we cut the lights off during the game, we have to wait, they cool down to cut back on. So there's a lot more technology out there, and we can do a better job providing services to the citizens. And, here you see the rough spots.
Something I was gonna say, part of your presentation here is that I almost feel like it should be policy, if y'all could make it that way, is a green light that's replaced in this building or outside, don't replace it unless it's an LED light on. Just period, end of story. It's like, it's gonna save us so much money. I know it might hurt a little bit cost-wise, and I know there's Band-Aid fixes, but I don't agree with Band-Aids. I'd say just replace it with LEDs, whatever it costs.
And we do, as we do sometimes, most of the time now, we replace it with LED. If there's a correct fixture and balance and all that other stuff to make it work properly. One thing we don't want to compromise, and we don't want to compromise our building integrity or the integrity of our program. We make sure that we are able to put in the best that we can put in at the time, and the most efficient. So what are we doing in-house? Some of the things that we are doing, I've been lucky enough to join the team with very qualified folks, and I learned something new every day, that, we have roofers, even roofer, and they're starting on doing some of these smaller roofs that, you know, they'll be able to save a couple $1,000s by doing it in-house. You see some ball field lighting, ball field switches, light switches. We had some facilities that had light switches on the inside of a utility closet, and patrons were having to go in and cut lights on, very unsafe, 420 watts of power. We moved those, started moving those on the outside of that building, and putting them on the lock, on the combo lock, so organizations can cut them on and off without having to walk in that building. The Valentine Walking Trail, we replaced that asphalt walking trail. We got lucky enough to work with Public Works. We demoed the existing trail. They came in and we spread the gravel. They paid it for us. We saved about 50% by doing it that way. We won a grant for a new playground for Starlight Park. That playground should be shipping on the 29th. So we should receive it next week sometime. And we will demo out the playground, and that grant covers installation. So it will be installed by a certified playground installer. Ball field renovations at Friars Gate, that is being completed using park funding. That's Park and Recreation Development funding through SCPRT. It's 80/20, and so our portion of that we cover the whole thing actually, but we have to submit reimbursements to get money back, and then they'll give it back to us less 20%.
Is that what Commissioner Valentine helped with, or
Yes.
Representative Valentine helped us out with?
Yes, and we have a second one that is currently being routed for North Springs for the upgrades that Darren had discussed. I think, well, actually, it's on his list.
Yeah, it's on
So-
the list. ADA stuff.
Yeah. So we apply for the funding, and we'll get as much done as we can with the amount of money we get.
Hold on, Commissioner Lindsay,
What about the six
I don't think the only thing on the report was it was on the list.
It's on the list
It's
as
on
one of our top
capital outlay.
priorities. We do have a grant application in with the United States Tennis Association, but as we all are aware, with COVID, that has changed a lot of the financial backing, so that grant has been put on hold.
And we went to the county to talk to them about getting additional funds specifically for tennis. And I know that the tennis group, USTA, is going to see the chairman of the council to talk about it. So they're gonna go deal with them, and I'm sure that we'll hear after they go speak with them. But right now, we don't have the money to do that yet. That's on our list.
The boat ramp isn't on the list. I will share, since we brought up the project, the boat ramp will be in consideration as a part of the county's capital improvement project, because based on our agreement with them, that will be their responsibility. So we will work with them to identify what those improvements are, because we still have to maintain, and it's important that we're involved from the beginning.
Ms. Watson mentioned North Spring Park, the park funding this year, we also applied for. We haven't got a response back yet, but we did apply for it. So, here again,
Who's that?
it's myself and my wife again.
I tell you what.
You know, so we always try to, we can always manage to save and try to be as efficient as possible, but sometimes it, a roof leak, you gotta replace it, and there you go, everything saved is gone already, but we try to do a good job of managing our resources, what we have, sometimes win, and, we know the rest of that. So, what it costs to operate a facility? Of course, these costs are, could be over the board, it depends on the function of that building. Back in Greenwood, we had a building that was open at 5 o'clock in the morning and closed at 1 o'clock at night. So the cost of that building is gonna be far greater than it is for our building across the street that's in use between, 7 in the morning until 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. So these costs are kind of, there's a little bit of sliding scale here, but $2 to $2.25 square foot annually for utilities. $2 to $2.25 per square foot, that's annually again for maintenance and repairs. For custodial services, keep the building clean, 60 cents to $1.05. And that includes consumables, that's toilet paper, trash bags, paper towels, that kind of thing. And of course, here to maintain the parking lot, keep it seal coated, striped, is between 45 and 60 cents per square foot. These costs are national averages. Our costs, we're still working together to try to compile what our true cost is for our facilities.
Well, you know, Thomas knows and Lisa knows that when we sign the checks, you know, every week, I personally sign that Dominion scan of Dominion electrical bill. And, you know, it can be $50,000.
It gives you heartburn.
It does. And, you know, and that's obviously for all the facilities. And I asked them to break it down per facility for me to see what Polo Road or what North Springs was costing us on a monthly basis. And, you know, I was surprised actually how low each facility was on an individual basis, but when you start adding up 40 facilities, it adds up. And what was kind of scary to me is that we probably have not been operating at, you know, full capacity, so it makes me a little bit nervous. But on the other hand is, from the electrical standpoint, if we can convert all of our ball fields to get I know it's expensive, but I think that there's rebates from the government on all those lights that you convert. If we can get LED lights put in those facilities, we will cut our bills in half. You know, and I think that will help Randy save us some money to go do some fun projects.
And if you look, you'll also see that that is a part of one of our strategic plan goals. And that came directly from there to become more green, more lean, and to reduce our footprint. We are Parks and Recreation. So it does give me heartburn to know that we are using up this much energy, and it's because of the way that the designs were done and some of the architecture. So we're just trying to go back now with fixtures and do what needs to be done.
I know, it takes time.
So with the number of buildings we have, do we get a discount or anything from Dominion?
Not in the handshake.
I asked that. It would be like a public, like a rate for public use or something like that.
I think we had some discussion with property management about going back to Dominion, to inquire if we are eligible for a reduced rate. But based upon those discussions, I believe we were told no, but we can certainly inquire again.
I think we go back.
Okay.
5 times.
They talked about utilities and them raising rates during the pandemic. You know, so.
Yeah,
That would be very.
exactly. And again, that's my former employer.
Sorry, that ain't my point.
I mean, seriously, just, there might be some more questions, but great job.
No, good job, yeah,
Doing fantastic.
yeah.
That gives us, we could take a 5-minute break if you would like, before we get into the last portions, which is money, money, money. And more money, I think we've been doing that all day, but we can take a 5 or 10-minute break. Chair Rapine, would you like to take that break?
6:50, come back at 7.
Yes, sir.
All right, then I'll call you back at 7.
Can we pause?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do, over the next few minutes is provide an update on our general fund, finances as well as our enterprise fund. And I'll start with our general fund update. And in this update, I'm going to, tell you where we are as far as our revenues and expenses for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. I'm also gonna go through what has been the impact COVID-19 has had on our revenues and expenses. And I'm also gonna provide you 3 scenarios on which we will need to review to look at how we can deal with those impacts COVID-19 has had on our budget. So the first slide is the slide that you're used to seeing. In your packet, you should have the operating statement for the general fund. And so for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, we have realized about $2.4 million in revenue in comparison to $2.8 million last year for the same time period. The major difference in our revenues are related to our program revenue. That is down by about 80%. So because of that, our overall revenue was down about 13%. For our total expenditures for the fiscal year, they amount to about $6.3 million compared to about 7.3 last year. And so that's a reduction of about 13% in our overall expenditures. I'll go later on in the presentation, I'll give you a breakdown of what's driving that decrease. What this slide here represents is an analysis of our overall revenue for the last 5 years. The reason this is important is because this slide shows you the impact that COVID-19 has had on our revenues. You'll notice that for fiscal years 2017, 2018, and 2019, our program revenues were running about 10 to 9% of our overall revenues. But you'll notice that in fiscal year 2020, that percentage actually dropped to 5%. And I'll remind everyone that the impact of COVID wasn't felt until really March of last year through June of last year. So just in those 3 months, the percentage of our revenues were cut to about half. What we're seeing currently for the first 6 months is that program revenue percentage is static at 5%. But when we're doing our forecasting and looking at our trends, we're actually thinking that that percentage of our revenues will actually be about 2% by the time we get to June. So there has been a dramatic decrease in our program revenues. And keep in mind, our property tax revenues were also reduced by about 1.8 million. All right, so what this slide provides you is a breakdown of the program revenues. So where exactly are we seeing that decrease in our program revenues? The major categories or the major revenue drivers for program revenue tends to be our rental revenue as well as our youth camp revenue. And so for fiscal year 2017, 2018, 2019, our parks and rental revenue was about 40-some% of our overall revenue. That has dropped. For fiscal year 2020, we actually realized just under 200,000 in that rental revenue. Again, that's the impact COVID has had on that particular revenue item from March to June. Whereas in the previous fiscal year, we were running about $500,000 in rental revenue, and the other 2 fiscal years are actually about 100,000. We're projecting that will probably be around that amount, maybe a little less than 192,000 when we end fiscal year 2021. Currently, right now, we realize about 52,000 in revenue. The other driver is our youth camp revenue, and that consists of our summer program as well as our after-school revenue. Right now, we're projected to see that be about 13% of our overall program revenue, where it's been typically historically about 18 and 20%. So just those 2 program revenue items, the impact COVID has had on that, that's where we're seeing that dramatic decrease for this year, I'm projecting. All right, so why does that matter? What this slide does is it further shows you that trend for program revenue, that decrease, but it also kind of starts to introduce what is the impact on what's called fund balance. And the reason fund balance is important is for governmental agencies, the fund balance really represents the overall financial stability of that governmental organization. And so how we get there is it's really looking at a reduction of your assets less your liabilities. But there's other things that impact that number, which is what's called change in fund balance. And so what that change in fund balance represents is the excess of your revenues over your expenses in any given year. And so for fiscal year 2019, we actually had an excess of revenues over our expenses of almost $1 million. And so what that does is it adds to our fund balance or our reserves. For fiscal year 2020, again, this is where the impact of COVID comes in. That number was reduced to about $793,000. So that's less that we're going to add to that fund balance number or our reserve number. Well, what I'm projecting is if our forecast holds and we do nothing to reduce any of our expenditures, I'm projecting we're actually going to have a deficit of about 2.5 million. So that's actually going to reduce our fund balance and reduce our reserves. I'll stop there. Any questions?
I've been through it. I'm just saying, when I say been through it, we've talked about it a lot, so
Right.
I have been involved in several discussions, but the rest of the commissioners is pretty eye-opening. I think that's why they're gonna have this discussion about some different potential ideas, how to drastically make sure that that fund balance doesn't go down that much.
And so now we're gonna have a discussion about what has, the impact of COVID had on our expenditures. As I stated before, our total expenditures for the first 6 months have actually been reduced by about 13%. Well, the major drivers of those decreases are related to training, maintenance, operating programs, and capital expenditures. But when we look at what is the percentage of those expenditures when it comes to our overall budget, they are run between about 1% to up to 17% of our overall actual expenditures. So even though we're seeing reductions in some of those, its impact on our budget is not as great as, say, our payroll and benefit expenditures. Because historically, those expenditures have been about 70 to 76% of not only our overall budget, but our overall actual expenditures. So what you see there is what we actually spent. So as a result of that, there are 3 scenarios that we have before you to help mitigate some of the impact of COVID on our general fund. That first scenario assumes that we do nothing. So we're gonna forecast that our revenues will be about 15 million, and notice we budgeted 18 million. So that's almost a $2.5 million deficit. We budgeted expenditures of about 18 million, and under scenario 1, we assume that we're gonna spend that. So if we do that, then we're projected to have a deficit again of about 2.5 million, and that impact on our reserve will be about 5.7 million.
Where does it say that?
What does it say?
Point to the 2.5 million debt.
Right here. Under
Okay,
scenario
sorry,
1.
all right, I got it.
Alright, and so in previous meetings, I've also talked with you the importance of what's called the operating reserve ratio, as well as the days cash on hand ratio. And what the operating reserve ratio does is it looks at what percentage of reserves do you have on hand in case you have any unforeseen expenses or any reductions in revenue. Typically, we like to have that at about 25%. Prior to COVID, that ratio has typically been between 60 to 52%. So we've had a significant amount of reserves on hand. Your days cash on hand ratio, what that does is it tells you how many days do you have on hand, cash on hand, to be able to meet your expenses, assuming you have no additional revenue coming in. We tend to like that number to be about 180 days or 6 months. And in the past, prior to COVID, that number has been upwards of 200 or more. Well, if we do nothing, we'll have a deficit of about 2.5 million. Our reserves are projected to be about 5.7 million. That operating reserve ratio declines to 32%, and we're looking at under 180 days cash on hand under scenario 1. Under scenario 2, we looked at our payroll expenses. And so in this scenario, we would propose that we would actually furlough all of our full-time staff. Those furlough days would be 2 furlough days per pay period, or 4 furlough days per month. We would also reduce that.
4 per month.
We would also reduce some of our training and travel expenditures, program expenditures, and some of our marketing expenditures. If we do this scenario, the impact of that is we would potentially save about $1.8 million. Our reserves would be projected to be about $9.3 million. That operating reserves ratio would be more in line with what we're used to seeing, which is about 52%. And the days cash on hand number would be about 197 days. Okay. Questions on that so far?
So, just for people that don't have to deal with a lot like myself, like furlough, can you give me the definition of furlough?
That is actually, and I will give you a definition, but we also have our director of HR on hand, so she can,
Can you tell me exactly how that affects a furlough, affects an employee?
It's basically taking a little bit of their salary for a period of time. Sometimes it could be whether or not they get laid off, or it could be if the individual has a part of their salary deducted for a certain amount of time.
And Rob,
Yes.
I wanna know, the furlough, are they currently doing the furlough now, or that's a projection?
No, we're talking about projecting three different scenarios. One being nothing, two is the scenario two, which we're talking about right now, is four full-time, every full-time employee would have 4 times
days
per
a
month that they would not get to work for the foreseeable future, I guess, until things get better.
And it would be different for full-time, I'm sorry.
Yes. She said that means they don't get paid 4 times a month, and I said yes.
so their
Yes, okay.
their take-home pay would be reduced.
What percentage is that of their pay? So if they're,
It depends on
Right.
its salary, yeah,
It's not
depends
like
on
you-
the salary, depends on if you're exempt, not exempt.
right, sorry.
Right, the non-exempt individuals?
No percent. It just varies.
Yeah.
The non-exempt individuals, they would be the ones to actually see 4 days. However, for the salary exempt individuals, most of us in this room, we would actually have our salary reduced during that time.
And then you would work 4 less days per period. per
No,
month.
we would just have our salary reduced because
we don't clock in.
we don't clock in and you can't tell
Okay,
me
that's
that,
a good-
you know, my.
Right, so you're just taking a pay cut.
Yeah,
Taking a pay cut, yes, sir.
from the top to the bottom, that's all of us.
You understand that, Donza?
Yeah, I understand what a furlough is, and I
No, did you understand that
That's
this?
what I was asking, they don't get paid for 4 days out the month.
No, that's not right. The salaried employees are taking a pay cut.
And
Here,
the
hold
staff.
on. I'll let you go.
Yes, the salaried employees, they will receive a pay cut. However, our non-exempt employees, full-time employees, they will have 4 days deducted from their checks. So,
But they still work
yes, they'll still work, but
the same amount of time, or do they work 4 less days?
they work 1 less day. So instead of 5 days a week, they'll only work 4 days.
Yeah, okay, that's good enough, all right. You got that?
So that's scenario 2. Under scenario 3, we wouldn't have any furlough days, however, we would look at unfunding certain positions. Those positions would be our
Say that again.
What's the third one?
Okay, under this third scenario, we would not furlough employees. We would look at certain positions and unfund those positions starting in February through June of this year. Those positions would include our assistant recreation center supervisors. We would also look to reduce the hours of our athletic coordinators from full-time to part-time. And then we would look at our custodians to reduce the amount of custodians that we have on staff right now. Currently, in our budget, we've approved 16 full-time custodians. We would reduce that number to 8 full-time custodians. So under that scenario, we're projecting that our change in fund balance would be about $621,000. That's a savings of about 1.9 million. We're projecting that our forecasted reserve would be about 9.6 million. Our operating reserve ratio would look to be about 53%, and our forecasted days on hand would be about 201 days. Now, under this scenario, we would also keep the reductions in our marketing expenses, our training and travel, as well as some program expenses.
Well, let me ask you something, have they, considered doing a 10% cut for everyone?
No, ma'am, we have not.
Maybe you should consider it. And see how much savings you can get from that.
Well, I mean, they can do that, I'm sure. It's probably not that hard to figure out.
I've done the form.
Yeah, did you see scenario two is kind of what I think you're saying, basically. It is all salaried employees would be taking a 4 days a week cut. It's pretty significant.
Yeah, I think before we do that, we would probably need to contact Joseph, who works with us on our employment matters, just to do a blanket 10% cut across the board. I think we would need to walk.
And he walked through these scenarios as well.
Well, I think that they'll have to talk to Dicky.
And I will share with you as your executive director, that would be something that I would not recommend across the board. I just feel that impact, it may get us to where we need to be, but that compromises our compensation study. It compromises a lot to do that.
Well, and it's not like you're not talking about, executive employees taking some kind of cut. It's just not across the board 10%. So they're getting, like you just said, they're getting their pay.
It's pretty significant.
Yeah. Well, what my question is, with the marketing expenses and the training and development, I mean, what are we marketing right now? You know what I'm saying? I mean, are there more cuts that can come from those, areas?
Right, now, there are more cuts, but I'll go back to the slide. When you look at the actual expenditures, yeah, we could reduce that to zero, but the impact of that will be minimal.
You know, I think this is great that you've done these scenarios. I don't think it's great that we have to deal with this issue. And I want to be very methodical about how we deal with this in the coming weeks, is my sense, because I do feel that, let's say by June 1st, that just my opinion, that things will be getting better. Okay, it's gonna be warmer outside, there'll be more people doing stuff, so hopefully this thing just lasts. Did you just do this till June, is that correct?
Right, so this assumes that those furloughs or those unfunded positions start in February 1st going through June.
That's what I thought I heard you
Right.
say. Okay.
So the later we delay this decision, then the less of an impact it will
Yeah,
have.
and I'd probably like to have maybe next week to discuss this again.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up is these numbers that I'm basing these scenarios on are based on forecasts. So to the extent there's some changes in our forecast, that will significantly impact that number as well. So if we have additional COVID-19 closures in which we're completely closed down and we're not serving the public or generating any revenue, that impacts those numbers. There has been discussion about possibly reinstating that 10% cut. However, there were certain limitations that we're limited to, it's called Act 88. So even though there might be a will to do that, there might be some barriers from us being able to get there. And then also, as we're getting ready to heat up in the fiscal year 2022 budget, there could be potential budget reductions as the county starts to look at their finances as well. So there's a lot of fluid and moving parts. The one thing I will say about COVID, outside that it's awful, is that being able to try to forecast and budget during this time has been very difficult. So we really try to look at our trends, look at our revenues and expenses, and try to see where we can save and what are some potential scenarios that can help us mitigate some of this impact.
You saved it for last, but you know, this kind of discussion is stuff I lose sleep over. You know, because I think about it, just my family. You know, we budget on what we make and bring in. So, I mean, it's not something that we just take lightly and say, okay, well, let's just cut. You know, people budget and have to live off of that. So, I mean, if you take a hit to it,
I mean, you're right. I mean, we have to make some tough decisions. I said though, you know, that when you have these reserve funds, there's only two ways to figure out when you lose the money. One is raise revenue, or two is cut costs. And there's just, that's all there is to it, but, you know, I from a business standpoint, want to show Richland County and our delegation that we are doing what we need to do to be fiduciary responsibility to our constituents and be smart about it, but yet, what Lisa just said, and I know Thomas and Steve and Don Zetta feel the same way, is we don't want to mess with people's livelihood, you know, it's part of this thing, so you say don't take it lightly, that's what I said, I want to meet next week, because this will be one of the most important decisions we make, and like I said, I pray that June 1st, we might not see a rebound for a long time, but I mean, maybe Lakita, we just shut down facilities. Period. I don't know if that saves us the money.
But as you just shared previously, there are still fixed costs that are associated with the buildings being shut down. We're currently we're probably at 5% operating, meaning the youth athletics right now is the only thing that's happening. My after-school programs and my virtual school programs are not performing. So we're basically closed, and we're down to 20 to 25 hours in a compressed schedule. So for us, when we're looking at an operating budget where the employee cost is over 60% of the budget, that is unfortunately the first place that we have to go. And by no means am I taking this lightly. Oh no, I've been losing sleep. No, I just said we've been losing sleep since, she's been telling me this since August. You know, she's been watching and looking at the trend. So, but what I didn't want to happen is that it would happen in a vacuum. No, as Lawrence said Saturday, these are the big level decisions that go beyond just my day to day. So that's why I'm bringing them to you all.
Well, yeah, I was thinking, Darian, youth sports is our number one thing, and I don't want to cut them off, but maybe we start turning the lights off at 8 o'clock. You know? Right. I'm saying 8 o'clock at night, like for the ball, or 9 o'clock. It said sometimes I'll go by the fields and lights will be on from 9 to 10. And there's one team out there, and the whole complex is turned on.
And some of the systems are set up like that, though.
I'm just saying though, but
You can't even
but-
close
But
down
if
one.
that saves the money that we don't have to cut everybody's payroll, you know, I'm just saying, like, I just want to do anything we can to not mess with people's pay and cut costs.
And so you do have 3 scenarios, and that first one does nothing. And everybody's whole.
I don't think nothing's an option for me.
And then the second is the furlough from every full-time employee. And then the third would be those eliminations. And so we are just bringing you based off of our experience. And this is happening all across the country. The city of Norfolk actually terminated in their Parks and Recreation Department 60 employees, short and long term. And they're still operating with their buildings open, some of them 12 hours a day, with supervisors and leaders, like individuals in these rooms, that are working out in the recreation center. So we know that we're not in this alone, but we do recognize that it's time for this dialogue.
So, just to talk about FOIA for a second, are these discussions that we can have in private to talk about? I'm just asking. Like, if
Only
we talk
if
about
you are
limit-
specifically talking about an employee, but
if we're
the
talking about,
budget,
we're talking about eliminating 60 positions.
I'll defer to Mayor Bob and to Lawrence to find out if you're able to do that.
well, I would think during that conversation, at some point, we'd have to look at individuals, because we're looking at individual salaries. So
I'm just saying,
part of it we had.
yeah,
But
I'm
portion
gonna
of
do
it,
what we can to
right.
save everybody's job. Or whatever we have to do, we have to do.
Can you say what?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys forecasting. Like I said, I put your team up against anybody in the county, state. But to do nothing would be ludicrous. That's why we have to plan as to what we need to do, have this dialogue, and we need to come back and meet, to discuss where we go from here.
And if there's an additional scenario, or if there's additional thing that you would like for us to look at, a combination of, if you would share that with us, and we will try to bring that back. But right now, based off what we've been doing for the last few months, this is the best that we have as your subject matter experts to present to you as our policy.
I'll put you on the spot. You have a recommendation?
Of
That's weird.
course, I always have a
We're in closed
recommendation.
session if you want to talk about it.
No, we can't. Well, I mean, I always have a recommendation. As Mr. Clark stated, it is, it's not a good idea to do nothing. I do support scenario 2 because it does, it impacts me as well. And I know that's one thing that people are looking at. I'm fine with putting some skin in the game, but I'm at a different level. And so when you talk about furloughing me for 4 days out of a month, it may not have the same impact on a full-time custodian or someone else. So regardless, these are going to be hard decisions that's going to impact all of us. So that was actually my first one, was that one with the furlough, because we did put some skin in the game, and it at least kept the agency whole. But it still doesn't get us closer to that gap, but it's closer to where we were, and that's something that we talked about. You know, if it's not going to actually get us closer to the gap, do we want to impact the morale of the employee? So I'm taking these hours or these days from Darien, but at the end, June 30th, we still have the deficit. What type of environment is this employee going to come back to work in? How are they going to feel? So it's definitely not easy decisions to make.
Listen, you're talking about 2.5 million, potentially $600,000 to $700,000 in loss. That's $1.8 million that you're, basically is a delta there, and that's significant.
So we have a conversation with supervisors, speak to employees.
This is the first conversation today. This conversation, and our employees, our HR director instructed and invited employees to log in, and I'm pretty sure some of them are logged in and are listening to this dialogue. So we have not given anybody instruction. This is the first time outside of the finance committee that this has been talked about in public. So if you would like to schedule, we can get corn for next week.
Yes,
Well,
yes, ma'am.
I'd like to recommend that they do a 10% cut, proposal to see what kind of money that was saving for all employees.
Well, okay, we'll look at it.
Okay,
Or they have to talk to the lawyer to look at it.
I mean, we can talk to the lawyer too, but, okay, let them do it. I just wanted to see a proposal and what kind of money we would come up with savings if everyone took a 10% cut across the board, and without eliminating positions. And then number 2, we would maybe consider eliminating some positions.
Okay. Why don't we, poll the commissioners that are here, including you, can y'all do this next Monday?
It's fine with me.
Thomas? All right,
I would have to join us electronically if we're gonna do this on Monday.
okay, well, then, we can do it. Are you
No,
on
I'm
next
fine
week?
with, I can log in, I have no problem logging in, Tamika can physically be
Okay,
here. for-
We're gonna be
so we
feeling,
can
you
move
would
this
be
forward.
here though.
No, I'm fine, I mean, we do this, A and B, we good, so we can get this done.
Whatever you want. I just wanted to do it for you as quick as we can.
Monday's fine, if we can get Coach B, I'm fine.
Well, we'll try to do next Monday. And then I'll call Coach B later. Thomas, what's his name?
And Cornelia, if you could do your follow-up.
Okay.
Okay.
Look, special call for
Format, that's it.
February the 1st.
No, well, we still gotta make sure,
Coach B.
Coach B and, Thomas can do it, so we're not sure.
Yeah, we don't have to have anyone be enough. I mean, any day after that, any day they're always available.
Are y'all considering Zoom or in person?
But
You want Zoom or in person?
personally, well, if Lakita can't be here, let's just do it Zoom. that saves all you guys from, maybe probably save money.
I'm telling somebody like
I'm
about.
joking.
Okay.
You need to save money. It's gonna mess with my meals.
And I will share, there are a couple of other things that we do need to follow up on, and one of them being our ability to work with the Special Purpose District Association and identify ways that we can sell properties that are in our inventory that are not going to be used for future park lands. We've been approached by a couple of individuals, one a developer, and then actually, I think it was the Department of Transportation. And we told them, there's nothing we can do, you're gonna have to either do eminent domain to get it. But as you heard Lawrence talk about, we do think that that is something that is a possibility to look at future ways of garnering revenue.
All right, you wanna get in the next one?
I didn't get what she said.
She just said that they're looking at dealing with legal and special purpose district conversations about the opportunity down the road to possibly sell some some properties that we're not using a lot, stuff like that to generate more revenue.
I thought yesterday,
You
well,
did,
actually last week when we had that discussion, the attorneys couldn't sell them.
correct. They are, and they're trying to see if there is maybe a workaround to that down the road, if it would be legal to somehow try to figure it out, is what they're trying to do.
Oh, I would agree, because I know it's stuff we're not using, and I mean,
She's just gonna try to figure it out.
we need to look at something that can be done pre-sold.
Well, this is kind of secondary. I think that's something maybe 6 months to a year down the road.
Yeah, sounds good,
All right, thank you.
Okay, so
thank you.
I will follow up tonight's discussion with a review of our enterprise fund and looking at where the revenues and expenditures are for July 1st through December 31st. And I'll say that this is a little bit lighter discussion because they have really been generating a lot of revenue for this first 6 months of this first fiscal year. So their revenues are up on all categories. That their total revenues for the first 6 months of this fiscal year is approximately $497,000. And if you compare that to last year, those total revenues were about $327,000. So that's about a 52% increase in their overall revenue. So they are seeing a lot of activity out of our Linwood Golf Course. Our overall expenditures are up just slightly, about 6%. And the major driver of that increase is because of some of their operational costs at the golf course, which makes sense as they are seeing more activity, they're still increasing expenditures. Are there any questions on that so far? All right, so the last thing I'll give you on the enterprise fund is here are a few things that we're working on for this year and the upcoming fiscal years. First thing is the transfer of the Upper Richland facility. If you recall back in November's meeting, I believe it was, you guys signed that, approved a resolution to transfer that building to the golf course. And so we're working to try to get that transfer of revenues and expenditures for that this month. I don't know if we'll quite make it, so it's going to be pushed to February. But at any rate, that's in the works. Also, our recreation superintendent, Mr. Matthew Chrisman, is working to develop a business plan.
Which university? Someone's doing this with us.
The University of South Carolina. Yeah, so he's working with their, I believe, business students to work on that plan. And so that's upcoming for fiscal year 2020. We're also looking at other ways to diversify our revenues by bringing tournaments and some additional programming out at the golf course. And we're also looking to remodel the first shop. The roof is in bad.
Just think if we had 2 golf courses.
So that concludes what I have to share with you today. It's been a beautiful day.
Great job, Randy.
I will share that I did receive a message from, I just received a message from Mr. Dickey. And so I don't think that I'm going to be ready by Monday with that 10%. We definitely can have that dialogue, But as he shared with me that there are a lot of issues with looking at a 10% cut across the board. It's not a simple evaluation. So I will not be able to do a quick turnaround, but I'll work with him to get at least the pros, the cons, the legal ramifications, or something that would at least provide you with some guidance.
That'd be good, if we just get the pros and cons.
Well, sir, that concludes the presentations. We do feel that this has been a very productive retreat. We do recognize that there definitely are opportunities for us to grow and to move forward. We do look forward to working with our legislative delegation as well as the other elected officials to identify not only ways that we can continue to do the great work, but to reintroduce the commission. We do recognize, and as we talked about marketing, like what are we marketing? You're right. Right now, we're not doing programs, but when we switched our logo, they did require for us to take a close look at all of our buildings, and it's not cheap to replace them. So we may stop and just start that back next year. But we do believe that the work that we're doing changed lives. And so we don't take this lightly at all. So I would like to again publicly thank this entire team for their professionalism, their stick-to-itness, and their flexibility. And to you as a board for your positive support, not only via the audio and video, what you share with me, but as you're out in the community doing the work as appointed officials. We know that it's not easy. We know you don't get paid for the work, so we try our best to make your jobs easy. So again, thank you on behalf of your team and your volunteers. We look forward to taking RCRC to the next level in 2021.
Ask you a quick question, just before we finish. Did Jenny Karras, did anything get settled with the roofing there?
We're still waiting for that assessment to come back, but I'll provide
They were
you with
supposed to
a report.
meet or something, weren't they? I think they were, weren't you meeting out there
Yes,
last Friday or something?
We actually met on site on last Friday, and some of the issues that they're having with the roof, we are still trying to fix them, trying to find the location. I have the cost to replace the roof, and it is,
How much is it?
about $150,000, all the different pieces of the roof. There's several different pieces, but so we're trying to repair what we can repair, and there's other issues there.
There's a
maintenance
parking
issues
lot,
too.
there's a parking lot.
Yes, we met with them about that as well, and we'll try to see if we can call a favor in and get it squared away.
And then also, one of our former chairman, Commissioner Jermaine, had called, did you all help them with, some COVID
COVID testing
testing and
or
stuff?
signing up for vaccines, past Commissioner Johnson. I know you were talking to him last week.
With Raleigh and stuff, they needed some help or something.
Yes, we're waiting for the final decision. 6,000 vaccinations were canceled, so they were waiting for additional supplies to come in. So we do have Eastover Park scheduled tentatively, but he's supposed to get back with.
That's good. I mean, we'll provide it as long as they can take care of getting enough vaccine for the
Yes.
community.
Yeah.
That's great.
I got one more question. ASCO, can they put all of these policies in a book for us, like we had when we first came? You know how they set up a book for us, showing all the policies, since we have so many new policies, it would be a policy handbook. I asked for it last year. I didn't get it.
We're currently updating all of the policies and we're going to put them in one place. If the commissioners would like the printed copies, the way we're doing, we have a book, but it's for employees. And so,
But we gotta vote them in. Once we
Yes.
vote them in, then we'll make you a vote.
How do you do it?
I don't wanna vote.
You just put the rules in as we get them. Okay, that's my choice.
I don't wanna vote because I won't read it. I'm serious. They'll just go away.
Human Resources will provide a book to our executive, our executive assistant will provide this information to Ms. Lindsay if she wants.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Job well done. Thank you, you and staff.
He's on seven.
But I only ask, once we get to a point of disseminating information that none of the staff is blindsided, that information is shared appropriately.
Yeah.
I mean, it ain't gonna taste good, but we have to make some progress.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we return. Do we need to make a motion?
No, you don't.
Okay.
Make a motion.
There's no motion. All right.